Can everybody hear me? Buenos dias. I am absolutely, unequivocally honored to be here. And the very first thing I have to do is thank some people, okay, like others have done. Juan Paulo, Nelson, Andrea, everyone involved in putting this event on who has asked me to be here. It's been incredible. They have worked an unbelievable amount. I think they've done a Herculean job, and I'd like to give them a quick round of applause because it's been an excellent, excellent event. Okay? The second debt of gratitude, and I don't mean to embarrass you, goes to Sue and Alan Cooper. Because 17 years ago, when I decided I was going to start my own business, I had little idea what that was going to be. When I found Cooper online, I went back to my office, to my 3 employees. I said, this is what we need to do. Okay? I would not be standing on this stage without your work. Thank you. Absolutely. Okay? So, I am going to talk to you today about what I consider to be my 5 rules for disruption. Now, when we think of disruption, another word for that may be innovation. Okay? You've heard from several folks who've gone before me about organizations that face challenges, right? To remain relevant, to stave off threats from competitors, whatever it may be. How many of you work in-house in an organization? Right? A lot of you. Okay? I think this will be very relevant. The first thing I want to get across before I start is that to me, okay, and in my experience and all the things that I've done and people that I've worked with, user experience to me is a value loop. We talk about users all the time. And it's a bit unfortunate that the term user is in user experience because it's about more than that, okay? What happens if a user, uses a product, right? First, they have perceived value. That makes you think, okay, maybe this is good, I'll check it out. When you act, when you use it, hopefully what happens, if it's good, is you get value, right? If that happens, and if you begin to trust it, and you use it, and you derive value from it, what happens? The business also sees value in the work that they have done to create and maybe update that product. So, value comes back to them as well. Money made, money saved, whatever it may be, and that leads them to continue improving it. You cannot have, I don't believe, you can have positive user experience without satisfying this arrangement. Here's the thing, when we talk about disruption and innovation, it's usually painted as a revolutionary act, earth-shattering event, right? The brilliant flash of inspiration that gets everybody out of their seats and goes, yes, we're going this way. Right? It feels like an amazing thing. You read all these stories. You see the Steve Jobs of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, who seem to just rise up and take the world with them. Here's what I think. I think that in reality, disruption is a lot quieter than that. It's a slow, steady process. It is often a great deal of work done by a great many people, sometimes fighting some difficult odds, difficult circumstances, and sometimes a distinct lack of support. So what happens with me is every week, okay, I probably get 100 and some emails a week from young designers, young UX professionals, developers, who essentially tell me the same stories over and over again. The things I hear look like this. The people I work for, the company, they can't get out of their own way, right? They know competitors are coming, they're knocking on the door, and they won't innovate. All right? Jim told a great story about this yesterday. How do I get them to listen to me? Right? How do I convince them that these things, this evidence that we have supported by data in a lot of cases, is real? How do I convince them that we have to do better? How do I convince them that we have to improve this? Right? Does this sound familiar to anybody? Of course. So here's the thing. Disruption doesn't have to be a grand gesture. In my experience, it often comes from simply drawing a picture. Now, I think we've heard a little bit about UML and formal diagramming and things like that. One of the things I always do religiously when I work with a customer or when I work with a team is there are only a couple things I want in the room when I show up. I want a whiteboard, and I want 3 markers. I want black, I want an orange or a red, and I want green or blue. Because the first thing I want to know if I'm meeting with multiple people, and it usually is multiple departments, I want to know how do you do what you do. If there are users in the room, it's the same thing. Walk me through what you do and how you do it. And that's it, and I let them go. As they talk, I draw. When we hit different points, like for instance, that second box there, planning call with faculty. At each step, every time I draw something, I turn to the room and I say, what happens here that's bad? What slows you down? What obstructs process? And eventually, I get a story. Those stories, those orange areas, are the places where the opportunity lies. It's where the pain is. Okay? I recently did this with a healthcare organization. We met with each department separately, okay, with the department heads, because it was an internal-facing act. At each moment, we were circling things in orange in there saying, well, we get to here and then we wait. We wait for a week. Why are you waiting for a week? Well, because these other folks were waiting for their information and they don't get it to us in time, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We heard these kinds of things over and over and over again. We got everybody together the very next day, and every single one of those people were shocked at what was happening in the other department. They had no idea. They had no idea that other people were doing their work because they weren't willing to wait for them. They had no idea that there were 5, 6, 7 versions of things floating around, and no one really was working with the correct copy. Okay, so what I'm trying to get across to you here is it doesn't have to be complicated. Okay? From there, we'll go to our first rule, which is the potential for disruption, for innovation, for anything that's, revolutionary, groundbreaking, call it whatever you want, to happen is when pain is the greatest. If you find yourself in a situation where people aren't listening, all right, to what you're proposing, it's often because they do not see the connection between the problem that they have and the solution that you are presenting. It doesn't speak to that pain. You will also find that if you have multiple stakeholders in a room, each one of them has a different pain. One of the other things that I try to do is the very first day or a couple days that I'm with a client, I want stakeholders from every department in the room. Because 9 times out of 10, they do not all share the same end goal for the product. Company goal may be this. People's individual goals, sometimes they're at odds with that. Sometimes they're purely political. I had a situation once where we walked into it was a global organization. They were looking at a major overhaul because their customers were essentially developing solutions themselves because they were tired of waiting for the company to do it. All right? So we get to see their setup. And it's a lot of custom development, built on custom development, built on custom development. They're plugging holes, okay? And they keep just sort of piggybacking stuff on other stuff. The head of IT takes 2 of us aside, myself and the partner I was working with at the time, and says, you need to understand something right now. This department and the people that work under me, we've invested a tremendous amount of time and effort in this. We are the lifeblood of this organization. If you suggest anything that replaces our work, I will kill this project. And I have the authority and the political power to do it. Do you understand me? That's what he said to me. Worth mentioning that he's unemployed now. Did I say that? So, at the same time, now as crazy as that sounds, if I am going to achieve anything for these folks, if I'm going to help anybody do anything, I have to know that. Okay? I have to know that because otherwise myself and maybe 2 dozen other people spend a great deal of time doing work that is going to go nowhere. So you have to get the lay of the land. You have to understand where the pain is. Because that pain, whatever it is, for that manager whose neck is on the chopping block for something, money made, money saved, performance, you have to connect that with what you're doing. And the way that you do that is that you have to speak the language of business and not the language of UX, not the language of design, not the language of development. Okay? You can get in front of a room of people, you can talk about design principles and best practices until you turn blue in the face. It either will not matter to a lot of people that you're speaking to, or it will go right over their heads. All right? And I'm not criticizing them. They don't understand it because they don't need to understand it. Okay? Their day-to-day reality is comprised of things that don't have anything to do with user experience or design. The only time they recognize design is when something is broken. When something doesn't work the way it's supposed to, right? So when you are talking, again, a lot of folks say to me, I can't get anybody to listen to what I'm saying. The answer is you're probably speaking along the wrong language, and I want to tell you a quick story about that. Years ago, there was a gentleman by the name of Ed Gold on the East Coast who was sort of a rock star around the Baltimore, Maryland area at least, and I really looked up to this guy. He invited me to come, this is when I first started my company, he invited me to come speak to his class. And to me, this was like the President of the United States sent me an email and said, please come and hang out with me. So I was beside myself. So I went, I talked to the class, I'm really loving this, and at the end of it, Ed says to me, tell the group about a time when you had a hard time convincing a client of something that was in their best interest. Okay. Of course I could do that. I'm a designer. I know everything, right? I'm an expert. So I tell the story, and it's very self-righteous, right? My chest is swelling as I'm telling the story, and I showed them that this should have happened, and they didn't listen to me, and this and that. So I finished the story, and this man, who to me is on this pedestal, right, looks at me and says, what did you do wrong there? Well, I'm not wrong. This is what I'm thinking. Right? Didn't expect a question. But he was correct. And when I stood there and sweated and thought about it, this is what I did wrong. I spoke to them in my language. I spoke to them about things that mattered to me. All right? My concerns are not theirs. My reality is not theirs. I never forgot that lesson. Okay? So it's very rare that even when I'm working with a development team and we are looking at a user interface and we're looking at workflows, or we're looking at whether something does or does not meet user needs, we're not always talking about UX, okay? We're talking about what is the problem here, and you've heard this several times. What is the problem here that we're trying to solve? Why does it matter? Okay, at the end of the day, what's this half of the value loop for this organization? Because if that isn't satisfied, this project goes nowhere. And if that goes nowhere, users don't have a chance of being satisfied either, right? Okay, so rule number 3, as a corollary, is without disruption, or I'm sorry, without adoption, disruption isn't possible. Meaning this, as creative people, it's very simple for us, I think, and sometimes it almost feels effortless, to come up with amazing ideas for how to design something, right? For how to change an interaction workflow. Go to Dribbble right now, and you'll see thousands upon thousands of examples of unbridled creativity, people who are just sort of letting loose. We're good at this. It's what we do. But here's the thing. If you ignore the natural constraints around something, okay, Laura presented yesterday on healthcare. Perfect example. Innovating in an industry where it's very tightly controlled and contained by privacy laws and things like that is a difficult task. But if you do not work within that reality, you don't have a hope of getting anything used, getting anything adopted. Right? By the same token, we hear a lot about mobile development. Right? How many people are familiar with the term flat design? Right, everybody. That's been taken recently, what I've seen, and maybe some of you have seen, to an extreme where it means we strip away all the chrome in the interface. We strip away controls, we strip away visual cues, we strip away guidance that tells people what the hell they're supposed to do on this screen. And it's a problem, okay? Because people need guidance. So you take a convention and you strip it away. By doing so, you greatly reduce the chances that someone is going to understand how to use it. Okay? Just presentation on older People, right? In UI design, same thing. If they can't make sense of what they see, they're not going to try it, they're not going to download it, they're not going to share it, they're not going to pay you any money for it either. Right? People have to be willing to use what you are designing. Just being able to create it is not enough. I gave it away before I said it. I was in a meeting with a client who brought in a business consultant, all right? And I was a fly on the wall in this meeting that they had. The one thing that he said that always stuck with me is this. He said, you have to remember always that silence equals agreement. Meaning this, if you are sitting in a room, okay, where you're doing user research, you're talking about sprint planning, you're talking about changes to a user interface, you're talking about changes to a workflow, whatever it may be, and somebody proposes something that you know is A, dangerous, B, a dead end, C, physically impossible within the limits of time and space, you know, any of those things, if you sit there and don't say anything, you're agreeing that it's the right thing to do. You're also agreeing to do it, which is dangerous. Because if it does blow up like you think it's going to blow up, guess where the first finger goes? Why didn't you tell us about this? Okay? After the fact, it's too late. The other problem with sitting and remaining silent is that you are robbing the people in the room of your talent. You are robbing the people in the room of what you are capable of. Every person in this room, as a creative professional of any kind, and I include developers in that category, you have something to offer, okay? You have knowledge that other people do not. That's why we get together in groups, because collectively we are better, we're stronger, we're smarter than we are individually. If you sit and remain silent because you are afraid of saying something dumb, or I'm embarrassed, or I'm not used to talking in public, you are robbing everybody, including the users, of a potential solution that could very well be the answer to their prayer. Speak up. Your opinions are absolutely as valid as anyone else's. I want you to remember that. The final thing that I want to say, and I decided I was going to be fast today because I know I'm standing between you and a meal. Very cognizant of that. The final thing I want to tell you is that disruption is not fearless. Okay? Again, I'll go back to the Steve Jobs of the world, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos of Amazon. You know, guys, people who came out and said, well, I have this idea about this thing, and we're going to do it this way. And the rest of the world went, come on, that's not going to work. And they sort of did it anyway, right? We look up to these guys as fearless, right? As mavericks, as they took on the world, they felt no fear, and they just went for it. Not true, all right? Greatness or success or creativity or any of the things that we all talk about on a regular basis are not the result of being fearless. Okay? When I started my business all those years ago, I was not fearless. I have had plenty moments since then where I'm feeling more fear than I know what to do with. The deal is this: if you believe in it, if you are committed to it, if you know down to your core that it's the right thing to do, and sometimes that's backed by data and research, then you feel the fear, okay, we have to come back. They don't want to see me. They can already see me. That's the answer. Okay? If you wait for the moment when you are fearless, it will not come. Feel the fear, do it anyway. All right? There's been a lot of conversation about difficult situations with clients, with stakeholders, with managers. Right? I think somebody stopped short of saying, you know, ask forgiveness instead of permission. You know, we can't do user research. So what? Do it anyway. Do it anyway. We don't have time to prototype. course you do. Of course you do. Make the time. Do it. I've never seen a situation yet where this wasn't possible. And one of the first things I do when I sit down with the design and development team, these are the stories I hear. Well, there's no budget for that. There's no time for that. There's no people for that. I say, well, there's you guys. You're here for 8 hours or more. I mean, most people work 12-hour days at least at this point. Just do it. Okay? Take an hour out of your day and do some of that work. Just do it. Forget the fear. Okay? It's not real. It's not real. Get comfortable with it. Go forward anyway. The more you do that, the more comfortable you get with it. And the more comfortable you get with it, the closer you get to realizing what it is that you really are supposed to be doing. Right? You realize what you're best at. But unless you start taking the steps, it is not possible to get there. It is my sincere hope that these things were helpful to you. So I'm essentially wrapping this up, and then I want to make 2 quick announcements. But first and foremost, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
I want to tell them 2 more things.
Okay.
Can you bring it back for a second?
La presentación, por favor, una vez más.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to tell you real quickly about 2 things. And the first is I started a private Facebook group a short while ago, which has grown to about 2,000 people, which is pretty awesome. I would be going live with them right now if I could, but I couldn't make it work. I invite all of you who are designers, developers, UX professionals to join us. The purpose of the group is to have people come together and help each other. And that's exactly what's happening, much to my great, great honor. People ask questions. I'm struggling here. I'm having trouble with this. Does anybody know how I can accomplish this? And people jump in and share their stories and suggest solutions. It's one of the greatest and smartest things I think I've ever done because it's really helping people, and it makes me very happy. So I will tell you that we don't accept everybody that applies, but I invite you to go to this URL, friends.givegoodux.com, and apply. The second thing very quickly, and I know you've gotten an email about this, is that if any of you are interested in my book, several people have asked, you can get it right now for the paltry sum of $7 by using that code. And that is that.
Un fuerte aplauso entonces para Joe Natoli. Joe, thanks again for your presentation and